Been an extraordinary day in Washington, D.C. Here to break all this down now is Raphael Sonenshein, the executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at Cal State University. Dr. Sonenshein, thank you for joining us. Originally, when we booked you for this program, it was going to be to talk about the Florida election results, but things, of course, Georgia election results, of course, but things certainly have changed in light of what happened today. I want to talk to you about some of the people who have called for the president's removal, people who are highly placed and in a position to actually do something about that. We've got Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota saying she is drawing up articles of impeachment right now. Is that something that is practicable, and could it be done? Do you think enough senators would actually turn this time and actually vote to remove the president from office with just 14 days left?
There's literally no way to know, Mark, at this point. There's also the 25th Amendment, which would have to be initiated by the vice president, who in the comments we just heard has somewhat broken with the president, who seems to be off on his own. And reports are that the National Guard was called in by the vice president, not by the president. And that's an important distinction and rather surprising. I think the real question, Mark, is how the Capitol building was left largely unprotected by the federal government. This is one of the most precious buildings in all of American democracy. And throughout history, we've seen gigantic forces outside the Capitol building when there's large crowds coming. And whatever we say about the Capitol Police or the D.C. Police, it's hard to judge just from pictures. But where was the federal government in protecting this building? It was not a big shock that this mob was heading toward the Capitol building.
Right, and you can even remember the images when Black Lives Matter protesters gathered in Washington, D.C., and the amount of force and officers in riot gear on the steps of the Capitol, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, that was overwhelming. And here, yet, we had something very different. A lot of people are talking about that in particular, the contrast between the responses from that group of people demonstrating versus this group of people demonstrating and ultimately rioting.
Oh, it's completely obvious. And while you could understand the officers were outnumbered, and we can't judge yet until we know the situation on the ground, it seemed like a pretty easygoing situation at certain points. And it's just hard to judge that. But again, in American history, this building has not been breached since the War of 1812. And for the United States government to stand aside and even leave it to local law enforcement and to the Capitol Police, even though everybody on earth could see this coming, is an important statement about the condition we're in. And regardless of whether the president is removed from office, there is something staggering about the abandonment of the members of Congress, the elected representatives, at the moment that they are exercising one of their principal constitutional functions, which clearly this mob was intending to prevent and will not succeed in preventing, as we just saw, because the leaders of both parties are pulling together very strongly, including Vice President Pence and his comments, to make sure this is carried out.
What's your assessment of the amount of danger this democracy was in at the moment these people stormed the building?
Well, the real measure of the danger to democracy is what happened after they stormed the building. And the horrifying thing would be if Congress had abandoned what they were about to do, which is to certify the election results. If that had happened, if they had adjourned and gone off and said, we'll come back in a few weeks, I would be even more concerned than I am right now. Of course, I'm still horrified that they were allowed to roam through doing damage, that this unruly mob was not being controlled, but we don't know how much force there was to be able to stop them. We knew that they were abandoned by the federal authorities. But thank God Congress and the U.S. Senate is going to carry out its functions here without interruption, and they're not going to leave tonight, I presume, until they're done. The whole story of this election, Mark, is that no matter what the president has tried to do, people have cast their votes, they've counted their votes, they've certified the votes, and I'm confident they're going to certify the election. At the end of the day, that's what our democracy is going to be built on, is carrying out what we're supposed to do.
And that is exactly what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said will take place tonight. They will certify this election in favor of the winner of the election. Raphael Sonenshein, thank you very much for joining us from the Pat Brown Institute. We will see you at another time, hopefully under much better circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.